I think I'm gonna jump in and make a start. And we might have more people joining us as we go. Just to make those of you aware that are with us now, that we're going to be recording this session so that we can share it on IVAR's website afterwards. Thank you very much for being with us here today for the next just under 60 minutes. Hopefully you're here because you want to hear about the research that's been carried out under the Jane Hatfield Award. We've got two fantastic pieces of research to be shared with you, produced by the first recipients of the IVAR and Ubele Initiative's Jane Hatfield Awards. And before I pass on to my colleague Carl from Ubele to introduce the first research team, I just wanted to tell you a bit about the Jane Hatfield Award. As many of you know, Jane was a trustee and then chair for the Institute for Voluntary Action Research between 2006 to 2021. And one of the things that Jane was incredibly passionate about was supporting the next generation of both researchers and activists. And she really wanted IVAR to become more proactive in this. So one of the things that our IVAR trustees decided that they wanted to do was, in order to celebrate Jane's life and her contribution to IVAR, was to set up an annual award that would be targeted at young researchers from Black and minoritized communities. And the Jane Hatfield Award is a grant of £5,000. It's given on an annual basis to support a piece of research on topics or issues that are related to community and social action or social justice. And it's conducted by a team of up to 3 researchers. And we've been incredibly fortunate in the award's first year to, with a partnership through Ubele, to be able to actually co-fund 2 awards of 2 teams of researchers. So that's who you're going to hear from today. Before I pass over to Carl, I just want to acknowledge Jane's friends and former colleagues who have helped to fund the award, including a generous donation from IVAR's former chair, Julian Ashby. Myself, Carl, and our IVAR trustee, Palmela Witter, have had the privilege of working with the 2 research teams throughout the last year. And we're really excited to have this opportunity for them to tell you more about their research. We're going to have presentations from both teams, and then there will be a short Q&A. I'd like to encourage you to share any questions for the presenters via the Q&A function. We're then going to collate and pose these questions to the presenters after the 2 presentations. At the very end, Carl Murray, Associate Director for Research and Evaluation of the Ubele Initiative, and Ben Cairns, Founder and CEO of IVAR, are also going to share some short closing reflections. So with that, thanks again for joining us here today. And now I'm going to pass on to Carl to introduce the first team.
Thank you, Katie. We have 2 research teams, as Katie has indicated, and that we're going to introduce to you. The first of the 2 reports you'll hear, and therefore from the 2 teams, is from a team consisting of Amara Felix, Sharon Tamale, and Naomi Robinson. A quick sketch as to the individuals. Amara is an educator, researcher, and consultant on all things gender, race, and reproductive justice related. She specializes in youth work and education. Amara has spent most of her career supporting the Black, South Asian, and Muslim communities that she belongs to. Sharon, on the other hand, is a researcher and youth justice officer who most recently supported law and criminal justice students. Sharon has recently completed her master's in education, focusing on how prison education aids the rehabilitation and reintegration of young Black boys leaving prison. Since working in 2 London prison establishments, Sharon is keen to continue her career in supporting those who have been released from prison and are now ready to live a law-abiding life. Naomi Robinson, who unfortunately can't be with us today, is a researcher and consultant with experience conducting user research in the technology industry, as well as social community research. The team focused on exploring how young Black men with prison experience engage with social entrepreneurship to create opportunities for themselves and benefit their wider community. Hopefully that gives you a very quick thumbnail sketch of the first research team. And without further ado, I will now hand over to Amara and Sharon.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Carl, for such a wonderful introduction. I'm just going to start sharing my slides before we give you a brief overview of some of the things that we covered in our project and also some of our key findings and asks. So, our journey began in April of 2022 when we met each other in what can only really be described as a bit of a speed dating researcher online meet events, where the three of us connected and realized that despite our very different backgrounds in terms of career and research interests, that actually there was quite a lot of common ground between us. That being a real interest in racial justice or injustice, young people, the criminal justice system, and really wanting some solutions for the problems that we were witnessing in other areas of our work. I think another thing that we really did have in common was this idea that we wanted our project to be hopeful and solutions focused, to move away from this narrative that is often kind of put onto our communities of always focusing on trauma and pain. So after completing our application and being awarded the grant, we then began with a literature review to explore what was already out there on the topic, as well as what the gaps were in this field. This was really helpful to unpack why we were kind of doing this research and actually help ground the work that we were going to do as well. It also helped us to justify this project and explain why we were doing this work and what the whole point of it was and what we were hoping to achieve. By August and then September, we began to meet our participants, with interviews taking place in the autumn and then early winter months. We recruited them via a Google Forms survey that we shared with as many people as we could, getting in touch with our own personal connections, as well as people who we knew were doing important work in the field. And from that, we then narrowed down participants who met our criteria for interviews, that being Black men under the age of 25 who had experience of being in the criminal justice system. Our interviews were conducted over Zoom with 2 researchers present, sometimes 3, ideally 3, and lasted for around 45 minutes with pre-decided questions that we expanded upon in the interviews, depending on what our participants said. We condensed our interviews into a spreadsheet to map out the findings and also to map out some common themes that our participants were sharing with us. From this, we wrote up our key findings. And in an ideal world, we definitely would have interviewed even more participants and also had a greater variety in our pool of participants. We intentionally chose not to ask for extensive details on their criminal records, on the details of the prisons that they were in, or anything really relating to their time in prison, because we did feel at this point that it would be quite a big barrier to them being open and feeling like they could trust us. On reflection, it would have been really interesting to explore the ways in which we might have been able to do this in a way that was actually trauma-informed and didn't damage kind of the relationship or the rapport that we were building in the interviews. The most difficult stage for us was definitely the recruitment of the participants, but we were relieved to discover and that Carl and Katie shared with us that this is actually quite common in all types of research. Given more time and funding, we definitely would have explored other ways to get the survey out and recruit more people. So after the interviews and after trying to map out our key findings, we then wrote up what our calls to actions would be. And it was really important for us that our calls to actions came directly from the key findings and actually from the words and the suggestions that the young men had made about what they would like to see and what they believe they would have benefited from whilst they were in prison. As you'll see in our report, we condense these actions into 3 phases: introduce, initiate, and invest. As Sharon will later explain, these phases also contain areas of work that we'd love to work on ourselves, as well as areas that we'd love to see other partners and stakeholders get involved in. Moving on now to the key findings. So we found out so much from our participants throughout our interviews. It would be impossible to try and condense it all into an hour, let alone 15 minutes. But these graphics in particular, you can find them in our reports, highlight some of the key information that we'd like to share. That being that education in prison doesn't cover as much as prison residents would like it to or need it to, specifically around social enterprise. Our research also suggested that education on social enterprise is being overlooked currently. We know that young men in prison are offered educational opportunities, but our research told us that these might not be of interest to them and that these topics might not inspire or motivate them. From our professional knowledge, and Sharon's in particular, we know that business is taught in prison. But what our research suggested is that whilst this information is out there, it's not being converted into accessible, useful learning opportunities for prison residents, as our participants informed us. We also found an appetite to learn about social enterprise is definitely there, and that because it's currently so untapped, it's an area of the market that's worth exploring and putting resources into. One of the most attractive things that our participants told us about social enterprise is that it has a greater meaning to it and often creates a sense of belonging, which is something that a lot of our participants felt they lost when they were in prison. It's also a hopeful model of business. And for people who have literally and socially been removed from society, this idea of belonging, of giving back to the community and being part of something for the greater good is particularly attractive. As mentioned, the education on social enterprise has some way to go before it becomes more accessible and relevant to young men in prison. However, the interest is there, and if given enough support, we see no reason why this couldn't be a successful avenue or offering that prisons might be able to have. Given the right support, like mentoring, accessible information, upskilling, and funding, this is an area that we believe could flourish and that could offer a tangible way of reintegration back into the community for many young Black men with experience of the criminal justice system. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Amara. So our participants made it clear that they do want to know about social enterprise and how they can start one up on release. So therefore, as a team, we looked at how we could contribute our educational recommendations through a pre-packaged social entrepreneurship curriculum. So we envision an introductory topics being taught while in prison, perhaps by careers advisors, teachers, or other resettlement workers. So the pack we'd create would include things like lesson plans, for example, topics on accounting, marketing, conflict resolution with guided learning hours, resources such as template business plans and example funding applications, and also real case studies. So that will be an introduction to men about the inspirational role models that are out there for them. So considering the concepts they'll be studying in prison, this could be paper-based or it could be uploaded on a computerized system such as Virtual Campus. We could even utilize videos on places like Virtual Campus. Although labeling this package as a curriculum, it will not be accredited. This is to allow people in prison to learn at their own pace and also discover if this is actually going to be a good route for them. So that's the introductory part. A secondary part would become more practical as it follows the person through the gate. If they do really feel that social entrepreneurship is a route for them, and we can start formal introductions, so providing access to live labour market support. So this could look like joining a secure app or platform for networking with other ex-prison residents who've already started up their own social enterprise. This is where we, again, reintroduce that mentorship concept, having someone to guide them on what has worked for them and what they can do to move their ideas forward. This could also include live networking events that are hosted systematically. So here we could have local funders or maybe commercial landlords that have workspaces, mentors, just to name a few. by no means are we suggesting that these are the only avenues to address the requests that the young men have made. But as a team, we want to ensure that we take every opportunity to respond to what they've told us. Of course, this will all take a lot of resources and time to make this happen. So our request is that you see that our key asks are worthy of funding, support and guidance, so that we can carry the voices of the participants forward in their journey of rehabilitation and social integration. Thank you. I'll pass over to Carl again.
Thank you, Amara and Sharon. I know it's 15 minutes, can go very quickly, and your ability to summarize in that time was brilliant. It's now for me to hand over to the second team, which is consisting of Ayushatu and Nikwat. Their project or their program, their report is called Barriers to Barriers. Just before we say a little bit, I bring them both onto the platform. Let's say a little bit about the two researchers in this team. Ayushatu is founding director of Idaria Life CIC, which is an organization providing accessible and inclusive health and well-being activities to help women improve their quality of life through being physically active, learning stress management skills and craft skills, with a focus on creating safe spaces for peer support. Her colleague, Nikwat, is founding director of The Delicate Mind, an organization that creates community-orientated and culturally competent mental health support. Through collaborating with local partners such as Birmingham City Council and Birmingham Voluntary Service Council, they have been able to reach out to around 6,000 individuals. Barriers to Barriers, a report, explores the experience of those actively involved in social action and social entrepreneurship. It presents a range of views and perspectives on the successes, challenges, and support required for racially marginalized young people to take a long-term social action view. I will now hand over to Ayushatu and Nikwat.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carl. When someone else reads your bio, you sound so phenomenal. I felt like I sounded like an incredible person there. But thank you very much. Nikwat?
Okay, hello. Thank you to Carl, Katie, Vanessa, Ben, Amara, Sharon, and all of you as well for being with us here today. We're very, very, very happy to be at this process. As anybody know who's written anything or written any report, it can be a very painful process with editing, re-editing, interviewing people and going through the entire process. So we're very grateful and very happy to be here as to where we are at this moment in time. And once again, thank you for joining us here today. As Carl mentioned, our report is called Barrier After Barrier. So this was informed by our own lived experience of being social entrepreneurs. So our purpose of the report was to understand and disseminate the barriers that racially marginalized young people, and we define young people as 18 to 35, face with regards to undertaking long-term social action and social entrepreneurship within the United Kingdom. So I'm just going to move on. We'll skip this because we've already had a wonderful introduction from behalf of Carl. So this is the context of our report. So we have the context, process, successes, some of the challenges, some of the support requirements, our conclusion, points of dialogue, and our next steps as well. So with regards to the context of the report, we wanted to explore, as I said, issues related to lived experience, wider community and desk research, and we use that to basically identify a list of barriers that were typically cited as reasons that people who are racially marginalized as young people feel exclude them from being able to engage with social action and social entrepreneurship. There is, or there was, in fact, a part due to limited availability of almost nuanced research around the intersectional nature of barriers, because as everybody here will probably appreciate today, intersectionality, whether that is class, race, gender, sexuality, all of those complicated factors will inform all of your life experiences, and we didn't really find there was a lot of nuance around that. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to understand and critically disseminate the barriers that racially marginalized young people face with taking long-term action and social for entrepreneurship within the United Kingdom. We did have a framework for classifying these barriers, so we wanted to ensure that we had an actual matrix or metric to be able to measure it upon as well, because it's very easy instinctively to think of something, but instead of actually having something to back it up or having tangible data metrics, I feel is well, it doesn't do your research justice. So our framework effectively that we used was from the Power to Change report in 2021, and that references the European Commission on Migrant Entrepreneurship's growth agenda. There's a few little things that were mentioned in it, which were business-related skills and competencies, which is, as Sharon, the earlier teams touched on earlier today, business training, legal advice, mentoring and coaching, non-business related skills such as networking, languages, communication, intercultural skills, and tangible resources, specifically, in my argument, one of the most important being access to finance and facilities as well. Then from that, our context moves us on to these three, which is business-related skills and competencies, non-business related skills and competencies, and tangible resources. So these are some of the things that were coming up as barriers that people were finding through our desk research, and generally what we have experienced ourselves, and from what some of the responses that we had from our case study approach. We took a case study approach, which we'll talk a little bit more about as the presentation continues. So some of the issues were things around lack of opportunity, lack of support from established organizations. So whether that was being connected to established organizations, being able to build successful networks with those kind of organizations, seeking support and sustaining relationships. Some of the non-business related skills and competencies were more to do with the sense of self. So those were lack of confidence or self-esteem within a person, a lack of time or resources, a lack of interest, or even being able to identify what social action itself actually was, language barriers, IT skills, and involvement activities that weren't even recognized as social action at the moment. A big example is caring. Carers allowance is very, very poor in the context of the United Kingdom, and that itself, even though it wouldn't necessarily be defined as social action in itself, in essence, it actually is. So recognizing that was quite important, and also tangible resources such as pressure on people's personal finances and access to sustainability of funding and investment as well. And again, we utilized these frameworks or these barriers effectively to take a case study approach. So we interviewed over, I believe it was 8 institutions or 8 individuals that we're familiar with who've worked in the social entrepreneurship space, all of them having different challenges, successes, and balances as well. We really wanted to get to the nitty-gritty of what itself actually looked like. And here is, I think, ASR2. This is where you take over now.
Yes. So from the responses that we got from the case study participants, we collated some themes that came out. And the themes that we came out with is looking at the successes, because there were quite a few, looking at the challenges that they faced, and looking at the support requirements that they shared with us, that they felt that they had with their work. So looking at the successes, just a quick summary, was looking at seeing that they were making a difference in their communities, being able to nurture talent and provide inspiration for people from their communities, and as well as influencing the sector's actual response to racism and connecting people of color in the work that they did, which was incredibly encouraging to see. Next slide, please.
Oh, there we go.
Now, in terms of the challenges, the big one was building and sustaining trust in communities, which is one that is such a subtle challenge when seen on the outside, but it's something that runs quite deep. And it's one of those challenges that came up most consistently across all the different interviews in terms of trying to engage racially marginalized communities in the work that they were doing, was one that they found particularly tough, but not one that was insurmountable. Also, access to funding and resource. So actual people, having people who volunteered, or having people be on their boards, and having the time to do all of the work that is required for them to deliver the work that they do, either as social activists or as social entrepreneurs, was quite a big one, as well as learning how to take a strategic approach in the work that they did, so that they weren't working purely out of passion. Next slide. And so the support requirements that came up were access to specific type of funding, as well as tailored up-to-date training and guidance. And this is one that I would like to highlight in particular, as one of the participants had a very good point to make, in that a lot of the training that is being made available tends to be quite a foundational level of information. And some of it is quite dated, in that it's giving people information on how to do accounting, or how to ensure that they can write funding bids and things of that nature, which are they're not negligible things to learn. However, it is something that is great for when you're starting out, but in order to sustain an organization beyond the energy of being in your first 1 to 2, 3 years, you require strategic information, you require how to build networks, you require the knowledge of essentially big corporate business. But a lot of people end up feeling as though that they're stuck in a very small sort of space and unable to grow the work that they're doing and grow their organization. Another support requirement that came up was having a peer network, and having a peer network, as well as emotional support. As Nipquat had mentioned earlier, the intersectional nature of the challenges that are faced by racially marginalized people means that there's always an extra burden beyond the actual work that's being delivered, with the challenges that they face with engaging in this kind of work. The next slide, please. And so as we lead on to our conclusion, would like to share with you just some words of hope from one of the case study participants that we felt really summarized the feeling, the attitude, the vibe, the way, the point of view that that we got from the actual study and from the research that we did. And it's this: I feel one of the biggest achievements in society is having people believe they have no power. Believing the world is the way the world is and is just too broken. There's nothing we can do about it. So just suck it up and live with it, because it hasn't changed for thousands of years. And where the reality is, it's changed an incredible amount in just the 100 years that we've just lived through. So a lot can happen, but people get convinced by the narrative that a lot hasn't changed. And we, as social activists, are saying, no, there's plenty going on. And back to you, Nipquat.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aisatu. So this is our conclusion and one of our points of dialogue that we wanted to share with you. So our conclusions that came through our case study approach was the following. So looking at strengthening existing networks, looking at community of practice and peer-to-peer support. This is really important when me and Aisatu have our own process of being social entrepreneurs, and we ourselves can attest to the strength of having access to a network of people who understand your process and understand what you are going through and have gone through as well. So having almost a pre-existing network which supports social action and enterprise, which is born out of specifically identifying needs within our communities, whether that is geographical, cultural, or socio-economical, having a strong foundation within an area where there's a network of people that you can access, there's a community of practice which everybody can almost agree to, and support that you can get from your peers working within those regions, it can make a huge, huge difference. The next one second. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Okay, so funding, which is a state-based investment fund and improved programs funding. Our experience has been funding has been inaccessible, or as my experience has been, it's been somewhat inaccessible. It's been over a period of 5 years where I've now been able to sustain and create and make the Delicate Mind as a ongoing institution and organization. So we think it's very important that the funding sector, particularly those who are here, recognize that there needs to be a lot more flexibility in understanding what funding looks like. And we would also push for a state-based investment fund as well. Capacity building, so better training support program, as Aisatu has simply mentioned earlier. So looking at current capacity building and training programs, they aren't necessarily as, I suppose, impactful as they could be. So we really wanted to emphasize that there needs to be much more better training and support programs across our institutions. Aisatu, back to you.
Thank you very much. And so just to help further visualize what our points of dialogues could look like in the real world, we're just showing what taking action could actually look like. So this short case study that I'm going to share with you is just from work that has happened in the last couple of months following the completion of our research. So as an organization, we now run something called the Women's Wellbeing Weekend. And thinking of those points of dialogue, I would like to draw out how this has happened in the real world. So in terms of having a network that is better able to support people, for my organization, being a member of the Outdoor Citizens, which is a coalition between the YHA, the Youth Hostel Association, and All the Elements, which is an organization expanding the diversity of people doing things in the outdoors, I was able to make business connections with the YHA, which then gave me access to funding that they had from Sport England to increase the diversity of people engaging in the outdoors. Now, because of the nature of this funding and what the onus was on the funding to ensure that more people, more different people were engaging in the outdoors, it meant that an organization like mine that didn't have a long track record of doing this kind of work, but had the potential to do this kind of work, was given the opportunity to do it. And now in terms of capacity building, because we were given this opportunity, we have now expanded the line of work that we can continue to support people with. We've expanded our network and we've strengthened our relationship with a big organization, even as a micro organization that sometimes runs on a team of one. So just to give a quick highlight as to how this can actually happen and how it can benefit us in the real world as social entrepreneurs.
Brilliant.
Next slide for you.
Sorry, I was taken by what you were saying. I was just really listening to you. So our next steps with what we want to put forward, and just to embellish upon that, is something that I was surprised didn't come up through our research, was specifically the idea of social capital. So drawing upon ASRT's personal experience and mine, when I began the Delicate Mind through my process of creating culture competence support because of my lived experience with depression and due to the passing of my brother, I found that when I was trying to engage with bigger institutions and bigger organizations, that they didn't want to know. They had no real interest in understanding the actual sense of cultural and competent support and why that was important. And I spent the first 2 years of when I was running the Delicate Mind, making no money, making a loss at everything. That's still what I was doing, just because I very vehemently believed in my vision. And I understood the nature of, well, if I can work with this organization in a practice which I would argue is somewhat exploitative, where they will make use of my skills, capacity, whatever you want to call it, and then I can then state that this institution is somebody that I have worked with, that's how I can build my social capital. And that actually works. I think there is a trade-off to working for free and as to how you build an institution and an organization. But social capital is very important because it is now 5 years on, those same institutions that were ignoring me are the same ones emailing with me and partnering with me, asking me to work with them in the same capacity. Now I have people that I can argue that I've worked with, such as Birmingham City Council, the NHS, and so on and so forth. Our next steps, focus is on lobbying. So we already have an event taking place in House of Parliament on the 3rd of November, where I will be taking this piece of research with me as well to further lobbying certain governmental departments to invest in create some kind of social action structure-based fund. And with funding, we're looking at creating the next part of this project. So we're seeking a micro part of £6,500, which will help us implement phase 2 of the project. And that will be a diagnostic toolkit for individuals to be able to go onto our website to identify the best avenue for them to set up their own social vehicle. It's very confusing in the beginning, so we want to simplify it and streamline the process, where you simply go onto our website, you fill out a form, which maybe takes a few minutes or so, or a minute or so, and it will then show you the best call of action for you to how to set up your institution, what the regulation looks like, and what the next steps are for you to have to do that for yourself as well. This is just to say, let's connect. If there's anything that we've said to you which has been of interest to you, please do get in touch with us. The slides will be readily available for you after this presentation. And thank you so much for taking your time. I think I've gone a little bit over time, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and say thank you for being with us here today as well. Thank you, guys.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much for your patience and giving us the extra time.
Well, thank you, Ayasatu and Nikwat. And can I just ask the other presenters and Katie to also join us on the screen? At this moment in time, we would like to ask participants to consider using the Q&A option to pose any questions. But before we do that, I just want to thank everyone for their presentation and for their diligence in keeping to time, and for Katie for being on call. Now, I say on call because at this moment in time, for the next 15-20 minutes, it's an opportunity for us to engage with yourselves. Katie's on call to answer any questions you may have specifically and directly about the Jane Hatfield Award. And myself and the team presenters are here to field your questions. I'm going to check the platform, the Q&A, to see if there are any questions. We had 2 already posted earlier, and I will pose those in a second, but feel free to pose any questions that you might have that the presentation has triggered. So if you bear with me, let me just find those questions. So remember that Katie's online for any general questions around the award. And again, do use the Q&A for any specific questions to our presenters. So just before we take some of the other ones, 2 questions that was posed earlier. And the first one directed to Sharon and Amara. If you bear with me for a second, let me try and find it. Okay, and Daniel Cox has posed a question. Let me do the first question first, and then I'll go back to Daniel. So the first question to ANS team is, he says, given your experience, what barriers do you feel you might encounter in getting the curriculum education program off the ground? Do you foresee any challenges other than financial?
I think I can answer that one. I think it's potentially being able to get this curriculum into the prison and maybe getting the buy-in from people who are already have already established their educational programs that they've got, and then for them to hear that, oh, we've got an additional one we'd like to suggest where it would fit in their learning. So I think something for us would be, if there is a way of getting support of having these sort of prepackaged learning, being able to go into the prison and as many prisons as we can get them into.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. And the question posed by Daniel was, does the Jane Hatfield Award have any updated information regarding current and or future funding for small charities running social action projects for young people? Yeah, for young people. And Kate will respond to that.
I can come in quickly on that one.
Okay.
Daniel, thank you for your question. So we will be running the award for a 2nd year running, which I'm really excited about. It's very specifically to fund research carried out by a team of young people. So not specifically to fund social action projects, but it might be to carry out research that's linked to social action, much as the 2 teams that have done the research this year have done. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you for that, Kate. And I'm going to pose the next question to Ayosatu and Nikwat, and then there are 2 other questions posted on the Q&A. So let's just pick up the Nikwat and Ayosatu question. You mentioned phase 2 follow-up in your next steps. Are you able to share with us any headlines as to what this phase could entail?
Yeah, so first and foremost, on November the 3rd, through another piece of research that I've worked on for the past few years, through a partnership with the BMSD, which is the British Muslims for Secular Democracy, which is always a mouthful to say. There's an event taking place on November 3rd in the Houses of Parliament where I'll be a speaker and a responder. And that is specifically to highlight and profile and platform Muslim-based organizations and causes and institutions as to things that we feel are very, very passionate about. So one of the things that I intend on doing is taking the report with me there, because there's going to be a mixed audience of people, some of them being politicians, some of them being people with state levels of power, for me to be able to explain and articulate the purpose and necessity of creating a state-based investment fund. Something that I think a lot of us hopefully would be in agreement about is charities as an institution, we are supposed to exist to try to deal with the root causes of a problem. Now, through my belief and my experiences, I found that quite often it's putting a sticking plaster to the root cause of an issue, whereas social entrepreneurship, I believe, offers the value and the opportunity to be able to really deal with what the root cause of the issue actually is for a relatively small investment, which is the reason behind why we thought a state-based investment fund was so important. So taking that piece of approach and work and then applying it with people in power, because there are different levels of power, is very important. So that's one of the ways that's going to take form. The second one is obviously creating some kind of diagnostic tool. So in the beginning, creating a social enterprise has been very difficult for me. I can't speak on anyone else's experiences, but I can speak on my own to say that I was given some advice, which to say wasn't very good in the beginning was probably a bit of an understatement. And if I had known and had something which is much more clear and concise and actually written with people with experience in social entrepreneurship, then I could have made a much more of an impact in the beginning. But every learning journey and every process is individual for each individual and each person. So in itself, it's inherently the worst thing. So we are also actively looking at seeking how can we get a relatively small amount of funding for us to create this diagnostic tool to make the process of social entrepreneurship much easier for everybody across the entirety of the United Kingdom. Yashati, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add towards that, or anything you've got to say?
No.
Cool.
It seems like you covered it all there, Nick, but thank you very much for that. We've got two other questions. Just pick up on Asimina. I hope I pronounced your name right. Do forgive me if I've pronounced it wrong. That question is, I've been trying to commission research and evaluation to more diverse teams, but I have found it extremely hard. Could the speakers share, and at this point, I'm just going to sort of ask you to just sort of take it in turns, and let's start with Nikwat, and then we'll end with Sharon, as you finished last, Nikwat. Could the speakers share any advice for funders on how to reach out to networks and or individuals to ensure the teams who conduct research are more diverse? And there's another set of questions. And what barriers do the researchers presenting, i.e. yourselves, today experience in terms of getting commissioned research? So it's a two-prong. You could either take both parts or just take one, given the time that we've got.
Yeah. So I think with regards to how you reach out to people is, well, you've got a target of people here today. So we're all young researchers. So do reach out to us individually, send us an email, and we'll be able to see how we can collaborate and work together to be able to push that approach. I think that's very important, because we are here and we are speakers who have actually been in a position that we are now talking about a piece of research that has been published. Something that I did emphasize was the idea of networks. So my research has only really taken place because, call it God's luck or call it circumstance, whatever you want, a roll of the dice. The fact of the matter is, me then seeing specifically there was a little bit of a project available at a certain amount of time, which aligned with my values, has actually been one of the ways that I've been able to establish and create relationships, networks with people like IVAR and Ubele to be in this kind of position in the first place as well. So I think that's very important to recognize, like, how networks are promoted and shared towards people. I can't say that I'm familiar with any kind of network which actually talks about platforms, how you can access research in a quote unquote parentheses diverse sort of sense. So perhaps there could be maybe some sort of springboard or maybe some sort of institution or some sort of space which specifically lists what kind of research proposals and projects are available, as opposed to people having to really specifically Google approaches to what kind of research projects are available towards them as well. And yeah, just get in touch with them. Let's see how we can have a dialogue to help you push and promote the research, so we can actually have a much more diverse, in the actual sense of the word, basis of research and understanding. That's my two cents, so to speak, but I'm sure everybody else is going to say something much better than that. So I'm going to leave it to the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikwat. Sharon, any thoughts from you in terms, you could just take the first part, because there's a few other questions. So could the speaker share your advice on making ensuring the teams are diverse in your research? Just pick up that point first.
That's an interesting question. I think there is a website here that I've actually accessed called Funds Online, and it's a database where you could find people who fund research. But sometimes when you go on those platforms, they're very strict in what they want covered in their research and what they'll fund. And I think with a project like this, what was great for us was that the Jane Hatfield Award was kind of, a little bit open and sort of welcoming to different ideas. So it didn't sort of close off what some of our ideas and what we felt was important to research was also sort of welcome. So maybe my suggestion would be not to have so many criteria that people are unable to feel that they're unable to apply for commission.
Thank you, Sharon. And there's another question from Herman Irish. I can find your question, Herman. Seemed to have disappeared. Was there a second ago? Have you deleted it?
Well, I think that was my tech ineptness that did that. I believe the first question from Herman was the age range for the award.
The age range for the award.
I was trying to type an answer and instead I deleted it. Apologies, Herman. Herman, if I'm right, I think the age range this time around was 18 to 25, but it was specifically because we reached out to Ubele's network of researchers. I think the age criteria, my guess would be we'd probably keep it similar. The main thing we've said is that we want it to be researchers that have some prior experience, of supporting a piece of research. But yeah, as I say, we might be reviewing the specific age range for the year 2. Carl, I think the second question was actually for Nick Watanabe Satu, and it was whether the 3rd of November event is open for other attendees.
I literally got an email on Sunday from Yasmin to tell me this is when you need to be free. So I don't really have enough details to give to you at this moment in time, but please do get in touch with me and I'll be able to invite you accordingly. I think it is, but once again, I got an email yesterday reconfirming, Nick, what I need you free at this time. So please do get in touch and I can give you more details there.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Nick, and Ermin for those 2 questions. And Daniel has a question for you, Sharon and Amara. Who would be delivering the curriculum to the young people within the institutions? And this is in terms of facilitators and running the sessions. Who do you envisage being able to deliver those sessions?
Yeah, so I can answer that. I think in the initial kind of pilot, or in the first iterations of the curriculum, we imagined that it would be the educators and the teachers who were already there, because they were already familiar with the individuals that we were targeting, and would hopefully, with all the resources and information that we were providing, be able to translate that into a way that those young people will, feel like they can absorb and learn in the best way for them.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And there's a Asimina has posed not a question, but a statement, I think it is. And I'll read it out because actually I think it's really positive. It's not a question, but I would like to highlight that this award is brilliant for bringing into the spotlight research that could have gone unnoticed to other funders. Research and evaluation in the UK needs to be conducted in a more inclusive, equitable and diversified way, including who is conducting the research and evaluation and what methods are used to conduct those research, who are the research participants, etc., and so on. Many thanks to IVAR for this initiative. And I think from ourselves, we thank you for that comment. And it's just worth knowing that the presentation has landed in some fertile ground. Ermin has posted, sorry.
Just really cheeky, just with regards to the earlier question with regards to diversifying teams, just a minute. I feel like a big part of the challenge is a lot of the time when racially marginalized communities are engaged in work that perhaps they're underrepresented in, their opinion is often requested for free. And I feel like a lot of the time, putting your money where your mouth is, which is honestly what IVAR and Ubele did in order, because had they not offered the money, there is no way I could have engaged in this particular piece of work. So I feel like, first of all, see if there is an actual budget to pay people for their time, because we all have things that we need to pay for in our lives when you want to engage with people from marginalized communities. Also, I feel like partnering with other organizations that are doing similar work to you. So IVAR and Ubele's partnership is a great example of how you can diversify research teams, find organizations that are of that community and simply partner with them rather than trying to establish your own pipeline of people, especially if that's not something that you have a strength in. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, find someone who's doing it already and work with them. And what I would also like to say is that perhaps that wouldn't necessarily be a research organization. You may have an organization that has a wide network and just happens to be in the community that you want to engage with. So letting them know that you would like to do this work, even if they don't have those people, and perhaps actually offering to train those people yourselves. Because I have been able to take up my mantle as a researcher beyond my university degree because Ubele had a project about 3 years ago now, so long ago, called Navigating Space on the Lockdown, where I didn't have any credibility really beyond my actual degree to be involved in. And because of the experience that I had from that, we had a nominal fee of about, was it £150 we were paid for our community research time. But because of that, I then got the confidence and the credentials to apply as a research, which is where I met Nikwat, as a researcher for this particular project, which is then springboard to other work that I'm doing. So also consider, if you're already a researcher, just offer to train other people if you're trying to diversify the team. If it's not there, we can make it happen. But I just wanted to say that before our time was up.
Thank you, Ayasatu. That's really great, and I think it really underscores what we tried to do, both IVAR and Ubele, from the outset, and we hoped we're able to achieve that. We're just about to close down, and really apologize for the question, but there is one question I want to take from Palmela, and that's to Sharon, and it's probably a short question, a short answer, in that she's asked, do you foresee the young men in the institutions being able to contribute to the facilitation of that curriculum?
So we were talking about potentially having men go back into the prison to teach the people that they had spent time in prison with. So that is something that we like to see happen. I don't know how feasible it is, but it would be nice.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you all very much, including those who have posted questions that we've tried to get through. We hope we've done justice to your questions and to your presence here this afternoon. Just before we close off, a quick word from myself, and then I'll hand over to Ben for the final words. The first point is an apology from Yvonne Field, who was due to share this next slot with Ben, but unfortunately, due to bereavement in the family, was unable to make it this morning. So she's asked me to extend her apology for not being here, but she's still inclined and is still working with Ben and IVAR on future projects. So the relationship has only just begun, in famous words. And from our perspective, in terms of Ubele, we have been able to utilize the foundation created by this relationship to extend our own work. We're working with racially marginalized communities, especially around getting their voices heard. And this is only a start, and we hope to continue that relationship with IVAR or with other associated partners going forward over the coming years. With that said, I will hand over to Ben, who will just close off the launch event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you so much. What an amazing hour. And yeah, I'm gonna try and kind of be composed and say a couple of quick things to close us off. I first wanted to say something about Jane. We love Jane at IVAR. We loved her commitment to equity and fairness and kindness. we loved her loyalty, her passion for this work, and her restless energy. And she always felt that we could do better. And I think this award is part of our effort to do better and to use our assets as an organization. Our collaboration with Carl and Ubele, which is a great thing for our organizations, I think, to provide this kind of open opportunity. And secondly, what a wonderful set of presentations. I read your work, but to see it come alive in your words was a real privilege. And thank you all. I know Jane would have been so pleased and so impressed. In fact, I think she would have been blown away, frankly. This is kind of way exceeded what we could have possibly hoped for the first year. And the power and quality of your work is so impressive. And she would have been delighted that the award will be running for a second year. I also think she would have felt quite strongly that there should be more of this kind of flexible funding for, as one of the questioners said, that Carl read out, for things that might otherwise go unnoticed. And she would have finished, I think, because she was never shy of trying to speak a bit of truth to power by saying that funders who are really committed to diversity and equity ought to be paying for this kind of work and not relying on organizations like IVAR and Ubele to subsidize it from their reserves. Until that happens, though, that is what we're committed to doing. And thank you again to the two teams. You're pioneers in an award that I hope will have a very long life, but you have got it off to an incredible start. And for that, we're hugely grateful and give you our thanks and respect. And with that, I think we're going to finish. So go well, everyone. And thank you again for coming. And thank you again to the teams. Wonderful work.